time-consuming, and it's not unusual that the people you'd really like to talk to, you're not going to get to talk to. So sometimes you got to deal with second best or third best, or the worst. But you got to do what you got to do. Questionnaires, the advantage of those, of course, is you can cover a lot of people concurrently. Pretty inexpensive, especially if you do it with a web-based survey technique. There's some good free tools out there like SurveyMonkey. Disadvantage, it can be costly to develop a questionnaire. There's a whole science around questionnaire development. You know, people who do scientific polling. It's really a complicated art form. You can get real misleading results if you don't know really how to design surveys well. So it can be costly to develop it. It could take quite a while. It might need specialized resources. And of course, there's no chance for interaction. They told you whatever they told you, and if you get an answer that raises another question in your mind, you don't have the chance to ask it. And usually you can't do a series of surveys. People get annoyed and get time consuming. So probably that's not going to work. Disciplined use of language. We'll talk a little bit about this, and there's some CPRE plus aspects of this too. This isn't really part of the exam, but language, as we all know, we talked a little bit about this earlier, how it can be misunderstood easily, imprecise, misleading. So often what we hear in an interview, in a conversation, is very subjective. It's how people feel about something, it's conclusions they've drawn, it's opinions they hold. Notice that none of those things are really facts. Facts are what we really like to have. But very often they're hidden behind one of those kinds of things. So, disciplined use of language, obviously, objective facts are a lot more actionable than opinions or feelings. We can use a technique called probing to discover the facts that underlie those subjective impressions, the conclusions that we often hear. I'll give you a few examples. Somebody makes a statement. I might ask them to give me an example. That might make it more concrete for me. I might have a better understanding of what they're really getting at, what's underlying what they said, if they give me an example. I might ask them, do you know how that happened? I might ask them, why did you say that? So I get at what's underneath the quote. And I might have to do that a couple times. I might have to go through several different levels. So, to give you some examples here. You might hear somebody say they hate the new organization structure. This is what I call recreational complaint. I'm annoyed, so I'm going to tell you about it. I didn't do anything about it, but I'm going to say that. And I might ask them, well, why do you say that? They might respond something like that. I used to know all the right people to go to, get quick answers. Now I have to go through channels. Okay, so now we have a better understanding of what the underlying problem is. This might have something to do with workflow. Because if they can't just call up the person, they've got to go through some rigmarole, some channels, some process. Maybe there's a way to make that process work quicker, be less burdensome, or less annoying. Here's an example of a conclusion. You guys probably have heard this. Somebody, you're interviewing somebody about their requirements, and they're saying, we need somebody from IT in our office. They don't really want to talk about why they need somebody. They just want somebody here, right now. Okay, so we might ask them, why do you think that's necessary? And they might say something like this: my reports were 2 weeks late because IT didn't deliver on time. So now we recognize that they have drawn a conclusion about how to fix a problem. Now we know what the problem was that they wanted fixed. We might well conclude, we probably will conclude, that putting an IT person in their office isn't the way to solve the problem. There's some other reason, other way to solve the problem. You find out why did they get that, and fix that, whatever that root cause was. Putting somebody in their office won't necessarily fix this problem at all. If the reason it didn't get produced is systemic, having somebody in the office is going to help. Opinion. Somebody might say the last upgrade was a train wreck. You might be, empathetic and sympathetic. Oh, that's awful. Why did that happen? What happened? And they might say, I had spent 2 days of time I didn't have to get back to where I was before the upgrade. So this gave us an opportunity to be empathetic, to hopefully connect with them a little bit on an emotional level. Better relationship, they're more likely to be open and helpful. And we also learned something about the consequences of an upgrade. So maybe the upgrade process is pretty flawed. Maybe there was no fallback process. We shouldn't have had that kind of situation occur. So we've learned something important that we may be able to act upon. And incidentally, this is an example where it might not have anything to do with the requirements of the new thing we're working on. It may just be tangential. But still, we learned something valuable that could give us a chance to give them something they need, help them out, create a better relationship, solve a problem, even if it's not specifically related to the project we're currently working on. Okay, creativity techniques. These are things that are good to use when the goal is out-of-the-box thinking, innovation. We want to really create something new. When we're in the early stages of creating some sort of a concept, and when we're looking for delighters. We're looking for things they didn't specifically ask for, but we're going to make it happen. Generally, this is good to use when we want details. It's not a good technique to use when we're looking for the big picture. And very often, it's the big picture we want first, and then we want to decompose it. And sometimes, what we're looking for is a breakthrough. We're looking for some real innovative notion of how to make things better. Brainstorming is one of those techniques. There's lots of information. Probably a lot of people use that. The idea here is that we're going to have a group together and we're going to ask them to generate ideas. And we're not going to judge those ideas, right? Every idea is a good idea, at least to begin with. And we're also not going to let anybody dominate the conversation. So we're usually going to do it on a round-robin thing. 10 people in the room, one idea from you, one idea from you, one from you, and so on. So we try to have some balance. We probably also have some rules about either we don't allow comments on anybody else's idea. Particularly, we almost always will say no critique. There's no bad ideas. So, but we might allow, we might encourage what we call builds on an idea. So taking the basic idea one more step, adding a bell or a whistle to it, making it a little, extending it. Taking the idea that somebody else came up with, but adding a variation to it, additional point, perhaps to make it stronger. Brainstorming paradox, the idea there is to flip things on their head, to take an idea, take the opposite of the idea. That's the general idea of that. And it's just to get you to think differently, challenge usual ways of thinking. There's a change of perspective technique, 6 thinking hats, maybe some of you have seen that. I'm not going to try to go into that very much here, but if you don't know about it, if you haven't seen it, look it up on the web. It's an interesting idea. And basically it's saying, ask a person to look at this from 6 different points of view. Same thing. It's an interesting thing. Sometimes it generates itself. Analogy techniques, that was not a lot used, but it's the idea of take something from an entirely different context, like take an idea from biology and try to apply it to computer science or to marketing or some other area. Say, what would be like that? challenging to do. And it doesn't work very well unless people have, if you're dealing with a group of people that have kind of a broad view of the world, generally they're more experienced people, they know something about biology, they know something about physics, they know something about mathematics. It works good for people that are well educated. It doesn't work so well with folks that are, have a much more perspective. Document-centric techniques, and the idea there is that we're going to reuse what already exists. So if we have user manuals for the current system, we might take those as a baseline and focus on what do you want to be different. So we're reusing, leveraging stuff that already exists. Document-centric techniques can be combined with other approaches, and usually they are combined. Seldom will they be sufficient in and of themselves, but they can be a good starting point. Other techniques, system archaeology, that mostly applies when we're going to try to replace a legacy system with a new system, and there's almost no documentation of the old system. So like an archaeologist, we're going to go look at the ruins, pick up some pottery shards, see if we can figure out what this was, what was the requirement that's expressed by this system, so kind of inferring it. Perspective-based reading, this is in a way kind of similar to Six Thinking Hats. It's look at it from a certain point of view. So look at an issue from the point of view of finance, look at the issue from the point of view of marketing, or whatever, any number of different perspectives. And then of course reusing whatever can be reused. Observation techniques. Sometimes this is going to be used, like, I'll give you an example, a call center. You're doing some kind of a system for a call center. Usually, because the people who work at the call center are being measured and compensated on their results, number of calls completed, number of bills collected, that kind of stuff, you usually can't interrupt them. And allow it, and it would affect their income. So you're not going to be able to interview them. You're not going to be able to have a conversation with them. So you're going to have to kind of sit and watch and listen. So an observation technique will be used in circumstances like that. Also, observation techniques like that can be used. Let's say you're, maybe a far-fetched example, you're developing a computer game for kids. Well, they can't tell you what they want. You're just going to have to watch what they do and see what you can figure out from them. So there are circumstances where other techniques just don't work, aren't available. Another thing that can be done is the requirements engineer can document an existing process. So there's a technique in the realm of Six Sigma that's basically lean. It's used to develop a process map where you make a flow chart essentially of what's going on, and then you annotate that with the sources of delay, volumes, error rates, that kind of stuff. Documenting the as-is state and questioning what's wrong with this. You either can do that interactively with people involved in it, or you can do it yourself. Once you have some facts about where delays occur, where errors occur, those are often clues, ideas that are used to identify errors for improvement. And these things are good when you're trying to get detail. You want to get a lot of detail. You're not going to